All right, so thank you for joining me, Anthony. And how do you pronounce your last name, just so I get it right? I can guess from the way it's spelled that it's Alaribe, but I don't know that that's right. So how do you say that last name?
You pronounce it perfectly. Alaribe.
Cool. So welcome. Thank you for joining me and also helping me set up my recording setup here. This was awesome.
Yay!
Yeah. So just for some background, I met Anthony at I'm not gonna say Htmx DevCon. At the Big Sky DevCon in Montana, Anthony gave an amazing talk, basically about a lot of myths with multi-page applications and stuff like that. So welcome. And you said you're just coming off another conference right now.
Oh yeah, it's been a summer of conferences.
Yeah.
But there was a Golang conference in Berlin, and Golang is my other love.
Golang,
before
nice.
Htmx came along.
Yeah. Yeah. So basically, you're just like your tech stack. You just go from conference to conference, and Are you?
Not so much.
Not
just
so much.
Just this two this summer.
Just these two.
Just those two.
So were you talking at the conference or attending?
Mostly attending. But I led a session on monitoring, and just a kind of a community roundtable thing. Yeah,
nice.
But mostly attending.
Nice. Okay, so let's I guess just like some background info from your end. I mean, I know you as a speaker on kind of general HTMX and browser expertise, but sort of what's your main project? What are you working on these days?
So I'm founder of a startup called API ToolKit, which is a monitoring and observability platform. And what makes it API toolkit and not just, monitoring toolkit is that most monitoring platforms are very general. Actually, most monitoring platforms have their background in infrastructure monitoring and sort of extended into application monitoring, starting with logs. And I argue that they don't give as much value as we care about as engineers. And API Toolkit is specialized on applications and actually looks into the payload. So it monitors the app and looks at the payloads that come in and out of servers, especially like REST APIs and any such APIs, in order to catch subtle bugs and breaking changes in the APIs. And if you've actually maintained backend services, you know that there's different categories of problems that our services have to handle, and this monitoring platform, they are optimized for catching when everything goes down or there's some crash or exception in the logs or things like that. But a lot of errors are actually that the service is working perfectly, but maybe one field is missing or one field is wrong because of a bug someone in the team introduced. And so API Toolkit optimizes for like learning and catching issues in applications, in web applications especially.
Yeah, interesting. So this is, I'm just kind of like realizing this now, but this is it's funny because one of the big HTMX things is not exactly using a JSON API.
I felt like a spy in the conference.
Yeah, so you're like using and examining, and like this is your extreme expertise, is like JSON APIs, how they should work, what formats, what breaks them, all this kind of stuff. And meanwhile, to build that monitoring tool, you are not using JSON APIs. In fact, you're using a hypermedia setup where, I mean, this is right. This is kind of the how the actual app is built using HTMX.
Exactly. I mean, when you've used APIs and you're so neck deep in this space, you realize how much things break.
Yeah.
It's so much can go wrong. There's indirection in between. And something that people don't realize is that marshalling JSON is also not fast. In a previous job that I had, we're handling quite a lot of requests per minute. And we hit a point where if you do a profile of the service, the only red spots you see are just from the JSON marshalling. Outside of course, the I/O that we're doing to the network. But with API ToolKit, I wanted to just prioritize developer productivity, especially when building the platform itself. And using APIs was just going to be a productivity drain, as opposed to focusing on, as opposed to what Htmx offers.
Yeah. So, one of the issues I've had with the JSON API, and one of the reasons I would say I've moved off of it in the last few years, is the need to version different versions of the API, because so I have at least one I have one mobile app, which is sort of the last remaining kind of API first kind of system that I have, and I have to be so careful when I make changes and updates, because some people are just never going to update the app on their phone. Like, they just won't do it. So I've had to make all these decisions in, do I version this API so that the next one can, or do I just kind of like update it without breaking changes and stuff like this? Yeah.
Ironically, this is our entire business model at API ToolKit. And the business model is just that you see the care you are giving to these APIs. You're actually thinking about breaking changes. In the real world out there, people don't care. So I have customers who are like digital banks, e-banks, and they depend on third parties. And a third party would just wake up at 2 a.m. in the morning and deploy some change that renames message to maybe MSG or the reverse.
Yeah.
So it's kind of a harmless change. Maybe it was MSG before and the person decided, this should actually be message. But forget that they have all these customers that have built their system around the previous implementation that said MSG. So what we're just doing is catching those changes, those breaking changes, and telling the team that, hey, like this third-party API you depend on, they've changed this field from this to this. Maybe you should update your systems, or at least maybe sue them for breaking some SLA or something.
Yeah, there's a special sue button on your site.
that should be like some premium feature.
Yeah. Interesting. So how do you actually do it? Like, do you connect? I mean, if it's secret, don't tell me. But I mean, like, do they give you like everything that the API should be doing, and then you kind of compare it from that? Or do you just like ingest every endpoint they give you and you make your own map, and then you like almost do like a git diff or something and check for changes? Like, what's your sort of thought process on that?
It's actually both. So first, anyone can upload an open API specification of the APIs they're monitoring, and that specification becomes the V1. That becomes the first basis which we start comparing any request. So we are a middleware, which means all the requests that go in and out would pass through the middleware. Of course, you can redact sensitive information or whatever. So we never get the sensitive information, if you like. But we're looking at the actual payloads of the request, the response body, and could compare it against the specification. So that immediately differs from the specification, we know. But for a lot of projects, you don't even need to upload the specification, because we actually would learn from the data that we're monitoring and generate the specification for you as well.
Yeah. Because I've never made a specification, because I'm always ingesting my own APIs, So I know I'm not going to spend time writing it. So that would actually be handy to have it do it for me.
Exactly. And the behavior, the implementation is, I was actually describing it to someone. I mean, it's pretty simple. It's especially for people who have some exposure to the blockchain space.
Blockchain, interesting. Now you're getting into it's pretty simple. You just need to know a little blockchain.
No, not all blockchain, but there's something called Merkel trees, which is popular in the blockchain space, and a Merkel tree is basically a hash of hashes.
I'm sorry. What was the name of it? Merkel?
A Merkel tree.
A Merkel tree.
It sounds fancy. It sounds fancy, but this is all it is. You get a bunch of hashes. Let's say it's a SHA, whatever hash, and then you hash those hashes, and then maybe you can hash some more hashes, and you end up with one hash. That hash, that entire thing is a Merkel tree.
So you're checking for changes in the hash and then routing your way down.
Exactly. So for every endpoint, we would get the payload. Let's say the request, if it's a JSON, and we would flatten it into these key value pairs, where the key is body.name.something, something like that. So we have the key, and then we have the list of values, and we hash each of the keys as well, and then we hash all the keys, then hash the keys together to get one single hash, which is the Merkel tree that represents that endpoint or one of the shapes of that endpoint. And what it looks like is that for every endpoint, there would usually be 5, 6, 7 shapes or hashes that represent that endpoint. That's the combination of fields that your customers or you would send out of that endpoint.
Yeah.
And if for whatever reason, someone adds a new field to the response of that endpoint or removes a field, etc., then of course it would mean there's a new hash, and that's a breaking change, and the engineer simply has to go and acknowledge if that change was intended or if it's actually a bug.
Wow, that's cool. Yeah. That's fascinating.
So just where our life is just a bunch of hashes. We're just like hashing.
That's cool though. I mean, that makes sense. And then sort of combining them together, so you just have to check one place, and then you see, okay, well now I need to check deeper. But it's like, this gives you like log of n ability to look into really complicated trees. That's cool.
It's actually even less because for most requests, I can hash it. I can hash it and just check in this bucket of hashes. In how do I say it? For most requests, we process it super quickly because immediately we get the request and we get one hash. We can just check and know.
Oh, you're checking like an index of that hash. Like it's not even not even looking in a big list. You're just like checking.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So for most requests, it's just we process it in like nanoseconds because we just get the hash, check. Okay, nothing special. Move on. So we only need to do something when a really unique request comes along the first time.
Yeah. Okay, so in your presentation at Big Sky, you showed some screenshots of API ToolKit, and it was a lot of like graphs, right? Am I remembering that correctly?
You're remembering it correctly.
Yeah. So what? I mean, it looked, it's very like kind of visual, which I thought was cool. It's a very sort of dashboardy look. So what are you showing in graphs like that?
At the end of the day, even though I'm talking about all this fancy breaking changes thing, which separates us from everyone else, but we're still observability, which means people want to observe. You want to see, okay, these are all the requests coming in. This is the error rates. So we are indexing all the errors that happen, all the crashes that happen on your web service. Performance metrics, what's the latency of these particular endpoints.
Wow.
So we know all the endpoints, we know how fast they are, how slow they are, how much errors are happening, and we allow you query that as well. So you might want to query, give me all the requests that my customers made, which had an error in the last in the last hour.
Yeah. This is so useful. I was like, because I'm like, just my experience with APIs, like I said, I just create them for myself, so I haven't like made one that's really ingested. It's my own apps that are using them, whether it's a front end web app or a mobile app. So my monitoring is like when a customer is like, I wasn't able to save, and I'm like, all right, I got to check whatever logs I have, and it's usually pretty slim. It's like, can I recreate it?
let me tell you the process for you. It's usually that you ask the customer, what were you doing?
Yes. Okay.
What screen were you on? What did you click?
I literally had that conversation a couple days ago. But yeah, keep going.
Exactly. And you ask that because if you can't reproduce the issue, you cannot fix it.
Yeah.
You have no idea how to fix it.
Here's my quote from the scene. I'm flying blind. So can you tell me what happened? Can you take a screenshot? Because I literally have no idea how that could have happened. It's like it wasn't a big deal, but it's like I can't recreate it. I've tried 10 different times. I don't know exactly what you're seeing. So just, do you know how to take a video of your phone? Like, send that to me, please.
Exactly. So that's kind of the benefit of actually logging the requests. Very few platforms log the requests and response bodies. I don't know why it's not so. Maybe it's just because of the scale of data involved.
Yeah.
But if you log exactly what the customer did, it means you could, instead of asking the customer, oh, what did you do, blah, 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 you can just go into your observability tool and search for that customer's request and copy it as a call, for example, and paste it in your Postman and try to reproduce it without asking. And this is very important because I'm Nigerian. I did my last 2 jobs. We did fintech in Nigeria, which is 200 million people. A lot of these people are not very educated. So even the basic stuff like sign up form, you have first name, last name. People would put the full name in the first name box.
Right.
And you're like, asking the customer, why couldn't you sign up? They're like, oh, it's not working. And you're like, what did you do? And he has no idea how to answer that question.
Right. It could be like, oh, I thought I was signing up 2 people, but I'm the first one, and then the second one is the second one. So, yeah. Yeah, so and if you're actually able to see it before they need to tell you about it, it's like you feel like a superhero.
Exactly.
Like, oh yeah, no, I know what you're talking about. It looks like you just need to, it just looks like you just need to split your name in different parts.
Precisely.
Exactly.
Yeah. You know what I'm talking about.
Yeah. So okay, so you're building this API toolkit. Did you start with HTMX, or was it something like, so how did you get started, like, with HTMX in general?
So I spent, maybe the journey actually starts a little bit before. I've always been trying to build like startups of some form.
Yep.
And the previous startup I tried to build was an utter failure because I was building it for 3 years with my co-founder at the time. And it was sort of a Shopify, but more targeted at the African market. And we never really launched. It was just so much work. When you're 2-3 people trying to build stuff, you have a React. We had something like a React front end and then a Golang back end. And it's just, you have to context switch between both modes. And my co-founder then, he did not know anything. He didn't care about JavaScript at all. So I would have to do a lot of this front end stuff as well as, and it was just slow.
Yeah.
So after that, we decided to no longer work on that. I took a break and decided I want to do something new. But I didn't want to go through that experience of where the engineering is actually what is holding you back.
Yeah.
You know what you need to do, but it just takes so long because of the hoops you have to jump to make something, to put something in the user's hands. And I wanted to build a regular backend, the kind of apps I used to build when we would do spaghetti PHP.
Yep.
Remember in PHP where you would do the SQL query right inside the HTML file.
Yep. And you could just pump those things out. That's what I remember about it.
Exactly. So I was like, I'm just gonna build these things because it felt like when I used to do that, like when I was even less experienced and just starting out, I would actually ship things. And now I'm like so much more experienced as a software engineer, but I can't ship a simple Shopify thing.
Yeah.
So I was like, okay, I'm just I'll become a caveman again. And then,
Caveman, yeah.
yeah, I think around that time I came across this GRUG BRAIN manifesto, and I was like, okay,
Manifesto, yeah.
this checks out. I guess GRUG BRAIN is me.
Oh,
And
that was my first HTMX thing as well. It was a GRUG brain too. It's just, that's funny.
It's a real thing. I mean, for anyone who, if you work in a really big company where there is very clear, there's the front end team, there's the back end team, and you don't have to worry about, you only have to worry about your back end. You never have to worry about the end to end product feature. Then you might not connect with the GRUG brain perspective. But if you actually have to do both, you realize it's painful. I have to learn state management, and also the front end ecosystem changes all the time. When I started, they were like, "Oh, you don't need state management. I don't even remember what was the way to do it." Then it became bad, and everyone had to use something called it's not Redux. Before Redux, a Flux implementation, and then there was like a dozen Flux implementations, and you're like, okay, which one do I learn? Then Redux became popular, and I think I built something in Redux, and at the time where I was finally getting to the end of what I was building, the ecosystem decided that, okay, this is really a lot of work. Maybe you should be writing MobX. Then I go learning MobX. And before you build something in MobX, they realize, oh, MobX is really a lot of work. Now you should use effects. Or it was just changing so much. And I was like, okay, yeah. I really just want to put a web page in front of a user.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I built API ToolKit in Htmx. Actually, before API ToolKit, I built some to-do app in Htmx.
I love a to-do app. I love it. So I've also built my own to-do app in it, and I feel like I actually recommend that to everybody because I don't know if you still use yours, but I set up mine for the purpose of it's like all these to-do apps. They're not really that good for me. I've tried so many now, and I'm just I don't want to fill in a form every time I have some item. I don't want to fill in a due date. Most of the time I don't care. I just need to see what am I working on this week. So it's being able to build your own to-do app with exactly what you need in it, I actually think that's a useful exercise. So did you end up 100%. Actually using yours?
Yeah, I used it, but I think I found that I needed to put in some more work, which I didn't put. Yeah. So I've not used it as much as I should.
Well, what do you use though? What do you use to keep track of your own items? Do you use anything?
Unfortunately, I'm back to being a caveman, and I'm using a notebook.
Okay. Notebook is something that's what I use sometimes too. But,
I use two things. Either I'm writing in a notebook, or I open a Slack message with myself and just put some checklist in there.
Yeah. Okay. So short-term, items that are clear, you'll put into a Slack message so you don't forget about them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. But I've used everything, right? I have a Notion to-do list which I never remember to open. Yeah. I have a Keep, which I still have a lot of things in Google Keep, but I really also don't remember to open. So yeah. But anyway, just coming back to HTMX, building that to-do app was just so. It made me feel like you have these constraints, but I want to build something very interactive. But I have the constraints that I get from using HTMX and not using React. How can I get that interactivity? So I wanted things you can click a command K, and you automatically can start typing it to do, having keyboard shortcuts. And I think that's when I created a pull request to add support for this HX actions to HTML. I'm still going to revise that. Yeah, but because at some point I discovered the way HTMX does triggers is just it's amazing.
Yeah. It is. It's ridiculous, right? You just I mean,
Like,
you
you
have
can
access
put-
to any event.
Yeah, you can put HX trigger intersect once, and that will get called once when that thing comes into the browser. If you've ever tried to write that in JavaScript, it is like at least 20 lines of code minimum, because you have to write
Yeah.
an intersection observer and then give it some callback, and it's just so much code. So I wanted to use those triggers, those HX trigger, but instead of hitting some HTTP endpoint, trigger some JavaScript or hyperscript, and I'm still gonna bring that use case back.
Yeah. Hyperscript. I haven't started messing with hyperscript yet. I'm sure I probably will, because I'm all on board with whatever the Carson's doing, but I haven't tried that yet.
Should I show you an example of something that you do with hyperscript that I'll just show you.
Yes,
I
just
know,
show me. Just show me.
Yeah, I know.
I know I'm gonna love it, which is why I haven't touched it yet. Because I'm just like, oh man, I cannot learn another thing. I just can't do it. But like, I can already tell I'm gonna love it.
So see this search box. Sorry, I thought I was sharing my screen. Sorry for people who are listening to this in audio.
I'm going to give like a perfect description of it as soon as you put it up on the screen. Don't worry.
Okay.
They'll feel like they can see it.
Oh, smart.
All right, we got a bunch of stuff on the screen. No, okay, keep it.
You see this search box?
Yep.
If I type, I want to filter this list, right? So let's say I'm typing.
All right, so we got a
Postman.
big long list, and we got a bunch of endpoints and a huge long list of stuff, and just a pretty standard like long list with the search box up at top. Typed Postman, and it's filtered down 3 items.
Exactly. So you see, like if I delete it, I get the whole whatever. But if I type Postman or if I type anything resume, it filters down to only the list item that has resume. How much code do you think it would take to write this kind of filter?
So, I mean, I guess I would probably do it with Htmx, and just if you were trying to do it with JavaScript, I've done that before, and it's a nightmare. And if I was using Htmx, I don't know exactly. I would have to really sort of think about it, because I would be sending a lot each time. I'd probably do a trigger, on key up, and then I would be sending and redrawing it. So what do you... I guess, first of all, is it going to the server, or is it just front end?
It's front end. So
Okay,
if I was going to go to the server, then I would use HTMX, like you said.
Okay.
But a lot of the time, you use hyperscript for situations where the data is right in the browser and you just want to manipulate what is already available.
So this is what I've been using Alpine a little bit for when I sort of need that, client side only DOM, things that affect the DOM.
I see. So let me show you the code that I wrote, and maybe you tell me how you would do the same in Alpine. It's literally one line. It's literally one line, and I have full, very flexible search going on in here. It reads as English. On inputs, that's every time I type something, that's on inputs.
Yep.
Show, this is the class name. So any element with this class name in the page. This is
the list below. Yep.
Yeah, when it's text content dot to lowercase contains so my value dot to lowercase.
It's so good. Okay, wait, but
that is all.
It's finding that text anywhere in the actual text, like because it's within different divs, right? Like it's all
exactly.
Yep. So input.
So in HTML or in JavaScript in general, if you have an element, you can do element dot text content.
Text content. I see. So it gets
this is
the
like
actual
a browser
visible text.
Exactly. So this is like how many characters, and I'm done.
Yeah. No, that's wild. So and I guess do you have to? My only issue looking at that is how do you debug something like that? Like you have to sort of get when it's on input show items list in items list page when it's text content to lower. So it's it reads so nicely, but how would you think to put those? You just sort of find an example and copy it.
I think you get a feeling for it. There are many ways to write this.
Okay.
So I could also write it in the JavaScript way. I could say show dot this in this when, I don't know, when dot items list item dot text content. You can write it. You can kind of write it like JavaScript in some sense. It's just I've gotten used to this way of writing.
I mean, I would prefer this if I could figure. You know, it's like if you can sort it out, then it's like. I mean, I always kind of want my code to read like English, so I don't usually use like the ternary or whatever they're called. It's like there's a lot of things I don't use, like collection, morphing, like so it's like more mapping because it's just hard. I'm like I'd rather use a for each loop. I'd rather use while because it's like. You can just look at it without any brain processing and know exactly what it does. Like I know what an if else does. Like I don't have to think about like the double question mark or other things. I mean, sometimes I'll use those if it's really like, you know, if there's a million of them and they're all the same. But yeah, like this reads so nicely.
The arguments people give against this style of programming where the code reads like English is that they're like, oh, it's so ambiguous. There's so much, it's English, it's not this. But in practice, like hyperscript is not all of English.
Right.
It has a very constrained grammar. And you learn that in like 5 minutes. You learn that you can do it or my dot, my. It's the same as you would learn that you can do this dot something in JavaScript. And instead of saying this dot, you say my. It's the same thing. And it's a very constrained grammar. And you pick it up way faster than you would imagine.
Yeah. Interesting. No, I mean, I'm probably going in that direction. I can already tell.
Oh, let me show you another cool thing.
Yeah.
You see this, so if I want to do select all.
Okay, yep. So we're looking at the same list, and it's got checkboxes over on the left. And up at the top, there's the checkbox that you check to check everything underneath it, which is happening immediately. There's no, millisecond delay where it's going to the server or anything like that. So this is happening client side. I'm going to guess using hyperscript here.
I want to show you the hyperscript. And I really like hyperscript that you can just inspect element and see exactly how it works.
Yeah. I'm going to read it out here. On click, set dot bulk action, item checkbox dot checked to my dot checked. So my is got to be the same as this, right? And it's like
the exact element you clicked on.
Yep. So the element you clicked on. So it's just saying set everything with that class bulk action item checkbox dot checked to my dot checked. So it's setting that value. Yeah.
Exactly.
I guess.
So if this is checked, all of those items with the class will get checked as well. If it's unchecked, all of those items with the class get unchecked. So it's like this feature, I've had to implement it in a dashboard in React in the past, and it's the kind of feature that you procrastinate for weeks because you're like, oh fuck, I have to implement this, and you just procrastinate because you don't want to do it. And then in hyperscript you just write set this dot check to this dot check, and you're done.
Yeah, it just happens. Yeah, that's wild.
And you get this whole locality of behavior because you just add that hyperscript thing to
and
the
like you said, you can inspect element and just look at it. Yeah. No, I like that. I'm not gonna lie. I like it.
I can see you getting converted.
Yeah. Okay. So you built. So what's the big kind of like, part of the question that I've sort of talked about a bunch on this podcast, and also just like every now and then I go on Reddit and talk about it. I'm on Twitter, and it's like I think one of the big questions is like HTMX still feels new to people. So, I sort of know my own answer to this question, but like people aren't sure that they can build real apps in it, like big apps that do a lot of stuff, that do this and that. So, you've obviously built this app in HTMX, and like how much of it would you say? Did you sort of embrace the whole thing, or is it like certain pages? Like what was your sort of approach for that?
So maybe the first thing I would tell people is that we were building applications before React and Backbone.js and all of that came along. So even before, I think Gmail was one of the first applications that went all in on Ajax, having this kind of complex Ajax apps. But even before Gmail, there were lots of other email clients that, maybe they were not as smooth as Gmail would be, but they worked pretty well. So if people from 20 years ago could build web apps, you can. The same tech is still around. You can do that. So what Htmx brings to the picture is that you can build your application like a caveman from 20 years ago, but your app feels like what Gmail could feel like. Actually, no one would tell any difference because it would be just as smooth. You would be able to have partial page updates. You would have all the nice things without going all in on some single page app React.js framework. And part of my talk at the Not HTMX conference at Bozeman was that even if you don't go all in on HTMX, the browsers have been filling in that gap already. I mean, the people on the browser teams, they're not stupid, right? They're building browsers for web pages, for web applications, and they've seen that a lot of people are building single page apps because they want certain user experiences. So they sit down and think, okay, do people really have to go in on single page apps just because they want these experiences, and what can we do? And one of the simple examples is that when I started, or at the time when React.js came out, one of the ways you would tell a React.js application apart, or even an Angular 1 app apart from a non-Angular 1 app, is that when you click in a regular non-Angular 1 application, when you click on a link, the browser would flash white and then load the next page. So that flash white was the thing which at some point nobody wanted the flash whites. So we went all in, but now you don't even get that flash white at all because the browsers have realized, we can do something about this.
I did not know that either. And after your talk, I was like, is he for real? Like, are you sure about this? How have I not noticed this? And I went and I have some apps that I just, use just to click a regular link. It's true. It's just like it now just updates. I guess it waits a little bit. It keeps what's on the screen there. And then it just pops in the new one. And I was like, oh, okay, you're right. That's done. Like, this doesn't have that
exactly.
That's funny that I hadn't noticed that.
And those are the best features. And I really commend the browser teams for doing some of these things. Because the best features are the ones that they come in, they make your life so much nicer. And you can subconsciously feel that something is better, but it's not glaring.
Yep. Well,
and there are lots of other little things that have come, since then. For example, now you can have there's this thing called the View Transitions API where you can build a regular multi-page app, and when a user clicks a link, you animate the next page into View.
Yeah, so okay, so you mentioned that, and I had not seen this before, and what's the concept for that? Is it matching the IDs or something? And how do you set, I guess, do you just set that up, like you set in the CSS or something like that? You're like, you want this ID to become part of this transition?
Exactly. So there is both a CSS API and a JavaScript API. So you have a lot of flexibility in how you want to animate things. In the CSS, they introduced some new pseudo classes where you can target the old page. So there's a pseudo class that represents the page you're transitioning from, and then there's one that represents the page you're transitioning to. And like you said already, the browsers are already doing this paint holding where when you start a request, they hold the old page on the screen and then make a request for the old page before they swap. That's why we don't have this flashing whites as much anymore. So if they are doing this, it means they have at some point they have both pages available.
Interesting. Okay, so this opens up the view transitions possibility.
Exactly.
Yeah, I haven't tried that stuff yet, but I mean, I would just say, like, if anyone listening, like, I'll add a link to that talk, but I mean, it was so good. Like, it was just like all this stuff I had never, because like I'm on board with keeping things in the simple side. Like I don't want to create a virtual DOM. I've done plenty of single page apps in the past, and I don't want to do it anymore. Like that experience was not pleasant for me, and like now that I have to go back and support, I got big into Vue.js. And when I have to go back and support those pages, like I'm just mad at myself that I'm like, this is not fun. And I don't know if I'm going to ever be able to upgrade this. I don't think so, because it was on like Vue 1.2 and I don't know what we're at now, but I'm sure they're not compatible. And so, I was even talking about that today on Twitter, how I expect HTMX to be almost literally the same in 10 years from now. And Carson, tweeted as well, like, yeah, I don't think it's going to change much. There's no reason to change it. And that's huge, right? I mean,
this is a value that I don't know why this is not spoken about more. We, as an industry, we've come to believe that, being busy, a project that is busy and changing all the time is the best way. So when you go on GitHub and you see a repository that was not updated in sometimes even 1 month, you're like, oh my goodness. I've seen someone create an issue saying, this repo wasn't updated in a month. Is it abandoned? I'm like,
yeah.
So now you're just changing things just for the sake of changing things, so people feel like something is going on in the project.
Yeah. So I think so. Let me push the other side of the argument here, which like I now work for myself, and I have clients, but the projects that I maintain, I'm responsible for. So when technology comes along that helps me never touch those projects again, but I still, get paid to support them. I still I understand this is for me. Great. But if you are, a million different developers who all need jobs, then I don't want to negate the idea that like these giant corporations need to keep paying a bunch of developers, because I like the developer economy. Like I'm glad that there's plenty of people out there who are working and having jobs and getting paid a lot of money to do support. But like that's so like, and when I am down on React for stuff like that, and I'm like, look, like it just requires so much upkeep for one app. Like what a nightmare. I wouldn't want to do that. But it's like, yeah, someone else is getting paid to do that. Probably a ton of money, maybe more money than I'm making, like doing my 20 different projects. So like, I'm like, I don't want you to lose your job. That's my I'm like, go keep working, do wonderful stuff, all these kind of things. But like for myself, like I don't want to be caught in that trap of constantly updating one front end app because it requires like a hand holding for its entire lifespan. Like I know that's reductive. That's a little bit like, I'm not trying to be mean about it, but like it literally is so much work to just keep one thing going. And that's not what I want to do.
Yeah, it's a lot of churn. I mean, there's, like you said, there's both sides of the argument. I also think the world is richer for having something like React.
Absolutely,
actually, yeah. Even in API ToolKit, I have some parts of the project that are built using web components. Because as much as we love HTMX and love hyperscript, and there's always just some user experiences that it's just hard to achieve with those things. But that doesn't mean you have to go in on React. But web components now, it only exists because someone decided to build something like React, and then the browsers saw, this desire, this need, and created a specification out of it. So we are richer as a result of of all the innovation that happens in all these fronts. I just don't want it's like a maximalist perspective that there should be only one way, or everyone should always jump on this new bandwagon, etc.
Yeah, no, and I'm on board with that for this too. Like, if someone asks me like, what should I learn for programming? Like, I mean, I could tell them my own story. Like if you're trying to be a single one developer, full stack, doing everything, like I might actually recommend HTMX for that. But if you're like trying to get in and learn all the tech, like React is a huge, and Angular and Vue, like that's a huge part of it. That's the front end world is gigantic and extremely important. Yeah, like it's a big part of the industry. So like
you have to follow the money when you're starting out. Do what's gonna get you paid first before
yes. Yes, and you might love it, and like then good for you. Then you can build like these incredible experiences that are client side, and like there is a lot of stuff that would just work better client side fully, and it's not usually what I'm working on. My stuff is primarily server centric because it's between work with a lot of different teams that are working together, stuff like that.
I mean, see the app we're using to make this podcast, Riverside. I mean, good luck.
Yeah,
this is on HTMX.
Yeah. That is a good point. Shout out to Riverside, which Anthony just successfully sold me on for this episode. If there is some sort of affiliate thing, I'm going to make sure that you get yours.
I appreciate it. Yeah, but it's just amazing software, so I'm always happy to recommend.
Yeah. So I mean, I don't know. I feel like I actually could pick your brain. I think I did at Big Sky DevCon in the after party, just pick your brain on this, because the stuff you talked about on the browser side, and there were 6 different myths, and that video, like I would highly recommend to check out that video, because it's like for somebody who's kind of trying to push the limits of what the multi-page app can do, what the sort of old school way of building these things. If you're trying to push those limits, like every single one of those tips, I feel like is like a key part of that.
Yeah, there's one feature that maybe I want to mention again for people who are listening. So one common use case, or one common thing that people want to do in multi-page apps is that when you click on a link, you get the next page instantly. And because of this desire, we've had things like turbo links for people in the Rails world. There was also libraries like PJAX. There's instant click.
I use that one.
Exactly. And once again, browsers actually listen. So now they have something called speculation rules, which is a kind of a JSON configuration where you tell the browser, what elements or what links to preload or pre-render, which actually gives you more flexibility than what PJAX would do, because PJAX would, you would just...
It worked on the hover, right? Like on mouse over, you mouse over a link and it would pull up the page in Ajax and then not show it to you until you completed the link. That's sort of the concept, right?
Exactly. With the speculation rules, you can have the same using... Yeah, but you can have the same with a moderate, it's called the moderate, I don't remember the word, but you can also have even more elegant preloads. For example, if you know that a user is absolutely going to click a particular link, then you can just preload and pre-render it from the get-go, which means when the user clicks, it's instant because it's already available.
It's just sitting there waiting. Almost like you have, if you were to preload a template in an SPA or something like that.
Precisely.
Yeah, although it probably preloads it after the page loads, so you don't even take that hit of like any sort of browser thing. Yeah, I mean, that sounds like, I don't know, just these things together, like view transitions plus the speculation like
rules.
I feel like I almost get tempted. I just want to like have like a laboratory where I just like try these things. Cause like, I have my job and my clients and like, it kills me sometimes that I would like to find time and a reason to explore some of these. And I do in the projects I work on, but like, I can't do them all right now, but I feel like I want to move in that direction. Do you ever sort of just use API ToolKit as like your testing ground?
I mean, I do. Unfortunately, but I do.
Yeah. No, it's good. I mean, that's the thing. You got to push the boundaries, Yeah,
especially when it's your project. We have this kind of what's the word, pride about something that you build. So you want to, make it the best you
Yeah.
can. Not always the best idea, because maybe I should be doing more marketing, but I'm like, I'm coding some features.
It's so fun. Yeah. This is the eternal developer founder struggle.
But something I wanted to mention about this browser tech is that you can be sure they would always be there.
Right.
Compared to when you master some API that comes from a single page app framework, which might not be around in a year. There was a time when I was mastering Redux and MobX, and I have no use for them anymore. But the browser would always be the browser. It's easier. Things don't come into the browsers very often, but when they come in,
you're right. Right. And this reminds me of one of the talks. I think it was Alexander, who works on HTMX there, and his talk was about actually changing HTML, and that's sort of the next level of past the browser. Is like, okay, can you actually add functionality like HTMX style functionality to HTML and make it, update HTML? And it's like between HTML and the browser, it's like if you got those, I mean, your app's gonna sit there forever and work. I mean, that's just like, that's huge, for people who are in our position of being, I mean, that's huge for, I think, anybody, but for people who are trying to save their own time and sanity, for me, that's huge. So
I agree.
Yeah. All right. Well, it's, I feel like I could probably ask you questions all day about this stuff, because I literally am learning like every single thing about browsers now. And ever since your talk on this, I've been sort of looking into it, and we'll keep doing it. But I don't know. I just like any other last thoughts you want to add? Where are you actually? First of all, where are you calling from?
Oh, I'm in Germany, in Berlin.
In Berlin, okay. And was that where the conference was also, the Golang?
Yeah, it's GopherCon Europe.
Awesome.
Here in Berlin, yeah.
Nice.
Yeah. So maybe the only last words I would give to people is build a lot.
Wait, something froze, and this was at a very important time.
Don't use APIs. You'll hear me in the final recording.
Yeah. Okay, but, wait. So sorry.
Use the browser.
Yep.
Okay. So final words is just for everyone: make use of the browser. Don't be too eager to think from an API first perspective. You can just build your HTML server rendered application and leverage some of these browser tricks to make it interactive.
And I'll just follow up on that by saying this is coming from somebody who works with more APIs than anybody else, who has seen every single side. You've seen all the negatives of the API world because you help people overcome them. So actually, I kind of imagine. Yeah, and I kind of feel like you're playing both sides here, because if more people use APIs, that helps your API toolkit business. And if less people use APIs, you're now the expert. You're one of the experts in the HTMX world, and sort of this other style. So I feel like you're hedging your bets here, and you've got both sides covered really nicely.
Because it's in my interest if you use APIs and actually. It's in my interest if you're using APIs and with all this, your apps don't work very well because there's so many things that can go wrong, then maybe you would use API toolkit. But on the flip side, I know no one is going to take the advice anyway, so we'll probably still be in business.
Yeah. There's so many out there already, so they're not going anywhere. But I do think you also you're making a little bit of a name for yourself. I think speaking at Big Sky DevCon and in the hypermedia world. So I think you got a nice avenue there too. I don't know how to monetize that, but I think it's awesome. So
I mean, we don't always have to do things to monetize, right? Sometimes
It's
you
true.
just do things for fun. And I
That's
like
what-
doing
yeah.
things for fun.
I'm kind of in the same boat. I'm like, you know what? I'm riding this train. It's not making me any money, but I don't care. It's fun. Like, you gotta have some fun sometimes.
I think in the dev ecosystem right now, Htmx is the most fun place to be.
Yeah, I mean, I don't disagree. That's where I've ended up just kind of like on for the ride. Like I'm just enjoying. I don't have that much to contribute right now, but I'm like enjoying the scene. So and the tech. Well,
yes.
All right. Well, I really want to thank you for coming on. Thank you for taking the time. I really appreciate it, and for showing me some podcast stuff that I'm probably going to use for everybody now. So.
Nah, sure thing, man. Sure thing. So thanks for having me today. I appreciate it.